What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Leah Hadley, is back with us today to talk about financial infidelity, understanding and overcoming the lasting impact. Leah is an award-winning financial planner, best-selling author, and sought-after speaker on recovering from financial setback, avoiding financial mistakes in divorce, and overcoming financial abuse. With more than 15 years of experience in financial planning and investment management and nearly 10 years experience as a mediator, she holds designations as a certified divorce financial analyst and an accredited financial counselor. Above all, Leah truly enjoys helping her clients build confidence, increase financial literacy, and make wise financial decisions so they can begin the next phase of life with the strongest possible financial foundation. Welcome back to AVAIYA, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Andy.
Yeah, so excited to see you again. And I'm so delighted with your topic because I think this is going to be really great for people today who have experienced what you're calling, right, financial infidelity. So why don't we get started right there? What is that for people who don't know? Like, what is this term financial infidelity?
Yeah, I would say, at its simplest form, it's lying about money-related issues or hiding money-related issues. It comes up in a lot of different ways in relationships. Sometimes people get it confused with financial irresponsibility. That's not what it is. But oftentimes when people are irresponsible with money or they make mistakes with money, they often want to hide it from their partner so it can lead to financial infidelity. But essentially that's what it is. It's either lying or hiding something money related.
Gotcha. And I know that a lot of the people probably watching this right now, whether they've also experienced some other kinds of infidelity in a relationship, often, they do experience financial issues within those relationships as well. So I think it's so important that you're educating them on this today. So what would you say are the signs of financial infidelity? How would someone know if that was happening?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of times when I work with people and we start to talk about this, they realize they've seen the signs all along. And it's things like initially just shutting down conversations around money, not being open to having those conversations, just having somebody kind of shove the tax returns in front of you and ask for your signature without, having any conversation about what's in there, especially for somebody who may not be familiar with looking at a tax return. But some of the new things that might prop up, so something that new, something's changed in a relationship, you might start to see financial statements come from institutions that you've never seen financial statements coming from before in the mail. If you share passwords on financial institution on your accounts, changing those passwords and not having a conversation about accessing those accounts, any change in access to those kinds of accounts, large movement of money. So if you're seeing big withdrawals from your checking account or an investment account and you're not familiar with what's going on there, that can certainly be a big sign. But sometimes some of the ones that people don't necessarily expect are actually the person feeling really guilty about what they're doing. And so the signs actually might come up in what appear to be a really nice thing. So it might be, flattery or gifts or things like that. To kind of cover up and mask some of the other things that are going on.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And just before we keep moving forward on right how this can impact people, I'd love if you'd share a little bit of your story. Right, how did you get into what you do? I know you've had your own challenges in the world of finances, and I think it's always helpful for people to see where you started. So can you share about that?
Absolutely. So interestingly enough, I actually did not start in finance at all. I started as a teacher. My master's degree is in education. And I remember very clearly the first day I walked into an investment bank where I was getting just a temporary administrative job at the time. I was really burnt out in the classroom, tons of student loan debt, and I just needed a job. And I walked in and I felt like everybody was speaking a different language. I literally did not understand the words that were coming out of their mouth. They were talking about stocks and bonds, and I had never even taken an accounting class. I didn't know what a balance sheet was at that time. I mean, literally no financial knowledge beyond sort of very, very, very basic rudimentary budgeting just to pay my bills, essentially, right? And I remember that feeling really, really well. And so that influences a lot of the work that I do, because I felt really dumb. I really, truly felt like I had entered a foreign country and people were speaking another language. And it's not like I was able to get up that learning curve overnight. It took me a long time in educating myself and doing a lot of professional development and training. And then I really grew up in this space. I was actually working in the equity research department. So in the, doing investment research. Again, I started in an administrative role, but I had some mentors who really supported my development in that area. And I started to learn a lot. But throughout my life, I have had huge financial setbacks time and again, as I think many of us have. It's not that straight linear line that allows us to get from point A to point B. That's not reality, right? And so that particular job at that investment bank, they got bought out. I lost my job. I had to find a job. I went through my own divorce. We actually adopted our 3 children literally overnight. So while we had been preparing it for months and months and months, all of a sudden we went from a family of 2 to 5, which was a very challenging financial situation. So, a lot of the work that I do really is influenced by the fact that I've gone through a lot of difficult financial times in my life. And I know how much having peace of mind around the money during their emotional turmoil, regardless, right? And so if you can have some peace around the money issues, then you can get through it a little bit easier than if, I can't tell you how many people I work with, Andy, who are going through a divorce for the first time. They're having to learn about money. They had their husband handle money for all of the time they were married. A lot of people get married very young, right out of college. They never managed money for themselves. And all of a sudden, they're going through this divorce, which is incredibly emotional. And now's the time they have to figure out all this money stuff. And there's a lot at stake when it comes to financial decisions when somebody's going through a divorce. So you have all of these different pieces that are just making things so much more difficult than they need to be. And so that is really what has driven my work. But I will also just tell you very, very honestly, one of the things that I find really interesting about financial infidelity specifically is in my own marriage, in my first marriage, I was somebody who lied about money. And the reason that I lied about money was because my husband put a lot of stress and pressure on not spending money. And I worked really, really hard. And that was really frustrating to me because I wanted to spend the money, my hard-earned money. I wanted to spend it, right? And so that was a big contentious issue in our relationship when we were married. So this is absolutely a topic that is near and dear to my heart because it really goes both ways and it shows up in a lot of different ways. And so for me, it was literally, wanting to refresh my wardrobe and like sneaking the clothes into the closet, And so while it certainly didn't harm our overall financial situation, it still was dishonest, and it still created that lack of communication or perpetuated that lack of communication between us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you candidly sharing about all of that and how you got to where you are today. I think it's helpful because I think a lot of people tend to have a lot of shame around like financial distress and don't want to talk about it and don't want to, have anyone know about it. And I too also, right, have had some, yes, big things happen in my past that were heavily something I'm not proud of and wish never happened, right? But things happen to all of us, right? We go through challenges, then we learn, right, from those challenges financially. And I like also that you shared your own experience of right, lying about money, and how that might come up for other people watching too, who have also had, right, that experience in a relationship. And so, okay. So let's talk a little bit more about financial infidelity from the perspective of impact, right? So if someone's in a relationship and there's a lot of, I guess, ongoing lying, et cetera, about money, like what kind of impact does that have on someone?
Yeah. So the thing is, and the challenge, it's hard because it's not just the lying, the distrust that it creates, but it can have a very real and significant impact on general lifestyle, quality of life, right? So especially, we see it coming up with gambling addictions are a big one, where there's a lot of lying and a lot of money just being used, spent, gone, right? And that is going to have a long-term impact on, both partners in a relationship, not just the one who's gambling the money away. Comes up a lot with substance abuse. That's a big one, but it even comes up with people who, and this is interesting. I've had several divorce cases where this is exactly what happened, where people have achieved great success in their career, and they have this image in their mind of how they want to live their life, but they don't quite have the means to do it yet, but they live that way anyway. And as a result, they accumulate significant amounts of debt that their partner may or may not be aware of. And then when somebody's going through a divorce, all of a sudden you're having two households being supported by the same level of income with this huge amount of debt, and it just leaves everybody in a really, really tough position. And so it's not just about that emotional piece, but really, truly the practical piece of how do I live now? But it also plays into what you were talking about before, Andy, where people have a lot of shame around these things. I can't tell you how many people will sit there and say, I should have known this. I should have been paying attention. I should have talked about the money, right? It's kind of one of those things where maybe when you're in the relationship, ignorance is bliss. You believe that the other person is taking care of it. And sometimes that person might be doing a fantastic job, but sometimes they're not. And they're not necessarily going to openly say like, hey, I'm not great at this, right? A lot of people aren't willing to admit that. And so people blame themselves. For years, they'll blame themselves after they get into these situations where they feel like they should have done something about it. And so they really feel like it's their own fault. And then as a result of that, they're less likely to ask for help. They're less likely to do the things that they need to do to get out of the situation. And just in the last year, I've had several women reach out to me where if you just have somebody take a look at your financial situation from a very objective standpoint, a lot of times we can make adjustments, restructure things, make changes that will have a huge, quick impact. So it doesn't have to be this years of grinding out, to try to get ahead. But unfortunately, it does. It leaves people with this really, really strong sense of embarrassment or shame around financial issues, and it makes it even harder to have those conversations, whether it's with a loved one or a professional. But then it also can be very, very challenging in future relationships as well, because you carry that baggage if you haven't healed your relationship with money into the next relationship as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I also think of, how many people bring baggage from childhood of their parents and how their parents managed money or didn't manage money and whatever was going on there into relationships. That's definitely part of my story, for sure.